I'm not sure if you ever listen very carefully to the lessons that we read on Sunday, but sometimes it's, at least for me, hard to live up to what the lessons admonish us to do. For example, today it says, pray without ceasing. Yeah, it'd be nice, but I don't pray without ceasing. I pray a lot, I think. Then it says, give thanks in all circumstances. Well, there are some circumstances that I'm not very thankful for. And maybe you too. And may your spirit and soul and body be kept sound. There are times when my spirit and my soul and my body are not very sound. There are times when life kind of tests us and the old spirit and the soul get wrinkled and we go through things, and many of you, much more than me, things that you aren't thankful for because they kind of cut at the very fiber of who you are. I want my spirit and soul to be sound. I want to be thankful for stuff. But there are times when I just can't measure up to the admonition of the word that we preach. And I guess that's to some extent why we're here. We all have circumstances that we got to get through, and maybe we need some support. And when your spirit and soul get a little wrinkled and tested, maybe it's good to come here and hopefully the music and the prayers and the atmosphere builds you up. I had a moment this week, and I just can't get this guy out of my head. One of you, about a month ago, asked me to visit him. And I said I would. Have you ever promised to do something and then you forget all about it? Well, you know something? They said, is there any chance you could visit this guy? He's a friend of mine. And right now, he's living in a motel because his house is being refurbished because he's paralyzed. And he can't get out of bed. And I said, of course I'll visit him. And so the other day, I'm going through my notes on my desk, messages and making sure I return my phone calls. And there's his name. And sure enough, I did not keep my promise. I promised I would go, and I didn't. Until this week. And I see Don's name, and I call him in his motel room where he is paralyzed in bed with a caregiver. And he answers the phone. He says, well, is this Pastor Don finally calling me? Oh, my gosh. If there's Catholic guilt, this was Lutheran guilt. Oh, man. Oh, boy. I was hoping you'd call. Well, I went there, and there he is. Now, he is paralyzed. He's in bed. And he begins telling me his story like we're best friends. All kinds of bumps and bruises in his journey. We're talking about all kinds of stuff, and I look at him and I realize how much in life I take for granted. And without having to say a word, he's telling me, when you promise to do something, either do it or don't promise to do it. The phone call you were going to make, the visit, raking your shut-ins leaves. Don't wait till tomorrow, because tomorrow may be too late. And I see this guy in his bed. He's absolutely dependent upon someone to do everything except talk and to think. And I'm thinking of the basic things in life. I take my mobility for granted. I'm just getting up in the morning and brushing my teeth and climbing into my car, going to the health club, walking the dog, or in my case, Harley walking me. I take all that stuff for granted. And I realize now, I just can't walk for myself. And you can't either. We've got to walk for each other. I just can't stand up for myself. We've got to stand up for each other. For the world. For Don in room 322. For St. Coletta's. For the lady who's got a car with no heat. We have to stand up for each other and walk for each other and use the gifts that we can to make a difference. Don might be lying in bed today, and he may not move much, but he moved me. Man alive, he just made me realize that there's just so much that I take for granted without even thinking about it. He's moved me to walk taller and to stand taller and to make that phone call and to give each day that you have and I have the very best that we can, not to waste the moments. So this morning, as I'm thinking about Don and about today and about Christmas and being together with you today, on my wall, and I used to preach a lot about sports, and sometimes you said when I was younger, you said, Don, not everybody likes sports. And so I've been preached about sports for years, and somebody said, how, Don, you never preach about sports anymore? Well, I'm not any good at sports anymore. But this morning I look at my wall, and there's a picture of Norm Van Leer. Now, you got to be old, like me, to know who Norm Van Leer is. And you all have your passions. You got the opera, you got concerts, you got music, you got sports. My passion is the Chicago Bulls. I love the Bulls. Way before Jordan came along, and way after. And somehow, by accident, about 25 years ago, Adam Alstott died. And his picture is right outside my office door. And I don't know how it happened, but Norm Van Leer got wind of the fact that one of our youth group members died. And somebody talked to him, and when we gathered on a Sunday night 25 years ago, Norm Van Leer walks in. He just walks in. And he kind of says, I know you guys have been through a tough time, and I was in the neighborhood, so I thought I'd just come and say hello. I can't remember how that happened. His presence was just a gift. And he was not perfect. He was a character. You know, he is a saint and a sinner just like me and like you. But we had the chance to ask him some questions about basketball, and so one of the people that was there asked him a question. He said, Mr. Van Leer, and this is when the Bulls were not doing very good. He said, I know it's got to be hard at the end of the season when you've had a bad year, you're not going to go to the playoffs. It must be hard to show up every night and play the game. And Norm Van Leer is a pretty fiery guy. And his eyes absolutely lit up when that question was asked. And he said, wait a minute. And I'm doing my best to kind of quote him. He said, wait a minute. I'm paid to play hard every single night. And he said, even at the end of the season like now, when the stands are half empty and we're not doing good, somewhere out there in the stands is a grandma or a grandpa who is taking their grandson or granddaughter to maybe their first and maybe only Bulls game ever. And I am paid to go out there and give it my very, very best because I owe it to them because they pay my salary every single game. And then he said, I understand last year you took Adam to a Bulls game and that you guys carried Adam from his wheelchair all the way up to your seats on the third level. On that night, every one of us, me included, owe him to do my very, very best because that may be the only time he's there. And shortly after that, Adam died. I remember one hot August this past summer. You know, I've been here so long. It was 95 degrees, and it was time for the late service, and there were like 37 people here. And I'm discouraged when there's only 37 people. I feel kind of bad. And then I thought of Norm Van Leer. And I said, on that hot August morning, with 37 people in church, there might be one person who walks in that door who's going through a tough time, who needs a spiritual boost. And on that hot August Sunday, I owe it to that one person to give the service my very, very, very best, because that's what I am paid and called to do. There's a guy in room 322, and he cannot be here, but he is here, because we are bound together by the power and the beauty and sometimes the fragility of the human spirit, and he deserves my best and yours. This season is about the gift who inspires us to use our gifts to make a difference to somebody else. Amen. If you're able to, please rise for the creed. It's on page 105.